He is the co-founder of Zoom Plus, which a lot of us know was formerly known as Zoom Care. How about a round of applause for Mr. Dave Sanders, everybody?
Hi. What's the best spot? Right in the middle? Hi guys, how are you? I'm Dave. I'm Zoom Care's co-founder and CEO. And I want to share with you just a few vignettes about healthcare and technology. The first vignette is a story of entrepreneurialism. The second one's a little story about I think sort of emerging American healthcare, and the third's a little about a team and its dream. So the first one is I was always one of those kids who always wanted to be a doctor from the very earliest of age. And I had that room with the dissecting kits and the anatomic models and microscopes and all of that. And I went straight through my education, through medical school, postgraduate, came out and began practicing and said, wow, can American healthcare really be this dysfunctional? This was always my dream, and here I am, and this makes no sense to me. And so this is now at a time when Tim Berners-Lee had recently wrapped the internet with the World Wide Web. It's about 93, 95. And we're thinking, okay, can we begin to use technology to change the dysfunction that we're experiencing in American healthcare? And so we begin a company that tries to create a little hub for medical offices, independent offices, to run their business more effectively and to compete with the healthcare system behemoths. And we have no prior experience, we have no idea what we're doing, and we begin to make some progress. And then I realized that I need to raise some capital to actually get this to the next level. And I have no idea what capital is, how you raise it. I'm a fairly young doc at that time. And I walk around and people say, what does Tom Hulse say about this? I'm like, who's Tom Hulse? And he's apparently at that time, he's kind of the archangel of startup companies. And so I go over and I knock on his door. He has an office up in Vancouver. And I nearly knock on his door every single week for almost 6 months. And no response. He has no interest in talking with me. And finally, one day, he lets me in. And we begin to strike up a relationship. We're talking about business and healthcare and technology. And one day he says, Dave, I'll take a flyer on this deal. Well, what's a flyer? And he goes, go back to your office. And I had a small little office with a small team of engineers. This way, yeah. Of engineers who were developing our product. And a courier comes in with a manila envelope. And in the envelope are 10 $100,000 checks. And a little note, and a little post-it note that says, Dave, this is the deal. I'll take 1/3 the company, right, for 10 $100,000 checks. That's $1 million. I'm going to sit in your board, and I'll hold your hand. And sign right here and give it back to the courier, which I did right there, got the deal done, and we were off the races. And for the next couple of years, we worked night and day on building this company up. And then one day, WebMD, that was really early on in its phase, and it, knocked on our door and said, Dave, we'll buy this company for far more than the $1 million that Tom has put into it. And Tom said, good job, lads, you're all done. Good work. I said, no, Tom, we want to build something important. We want to really keep going at this. We're just getting going. And Tom says, no, you don't understand how this works. You guys have worked very hard. We've put our money into the business, right? And you've gotten it up to here. But to go from here to here is incredibly hard. You don't understand the luck, the work, the resources required to actually get from here to here. I said, yeah, I don't know, but I want to try to do it. So I said, I'm going to move down to Silicon Valley for 6 months, learn how to raise money, and figure it out. And so he reluctantly, but very supportively, did that. And we ended up raising a Series A round after that angel seed round. But long story short, ultimately that company was sold to Walgreens, but Tom was right and I was wrong. The effort to get from here to here was phenomenal. I had no idea what I was getting into. And we ended up raising too much capital and all the usual stories. But in the end, we got a great MBA out of it. And I think that was the beginning point of our life in American healthcare. I want to tell you a second story. How many of you know the story of Rolls-Royce Aeronautics? It's a great story, and I think it really, paints the picture in technical terms, in terms of disruption, in terms of innovation, but in an industry parallel to American healthcare. So Rolls-Royce Aeronautics was a faltering, failing British aeroplane engine manufacturer. They were being disrupted by low-cost manufacturers, largely in Asia. And the team was on its last legs, and the British government lends them a loan to keep going. They develop a team, a skunk works team, to kind of figure out the way forward. And they dissect out the industry, and they say, we're asking the wrong question. What does the customer really want? What job is the customer really hiring us for? And they realized the customer really wanted to hire them not for engines, but for air traffic, for air safety. That was the real job they cared about now, was air safety. So they said, what if we stop selling hunks of steel, if you will, right, engines, and what if we sell air safety contracts? So they began to embed in the engines sensors, and they built a hub, I think outside of Birmingham, and they began to sell 25-year, 8-9 or 9-9, uptime and safety and security contracts for their engines on a subscription model and stopped selling engines. And that was the story of how Rolls-Royce Aeronautics came back to life. They exited the product business, right, the hunk of steel business, and they began selling what the customer really wanted at the highest level of their needs, right, air safety. I think this is a parallel for what's going on today in American healthcare. I don't think that you and you really want to be buying doctor's visits. Not really. You don't really want to be buying hospital visits, right? What you really want to buy is health, safety. In the same way that I think that airplane companies airlines want to buy safety, right? You want to buy health. And so I think that brings us to what a team in Portland today is trying to do. We, after the sale of that earlier company and another activity, all focused around technology at the core, we decided to go back to the core in the year 2005, 10 years ago, and focus everything on this customer of ours who we imagined in our mind named Sarah. And we thought that she had 7 unmet needs that time. Things like she wanted health care when she wanted it, neighborhood, where she wanted it, in the palm of her hand. She wanted to control everything. She wanted one fair, clear price. And we began a small experiment in a mall in Tigard, and we totally struggled. And factually, in that first month, our revenue was $140. And for the first full year, we were at $48,000, completely not making it. But we began to keep focusing on this Sarah and what her needs were on this Sarah 7 model, and began to figure it out. And brick by brick, Sarah's began to come in and tell 10 more. And Sarah is this, right? Sarah's a customer. She isn't a real person. She's a figment of our analysis, our imagination, our intuition. And we begin to have success. Again, we've taken no outside capital now. We're just growing the company organically. And we go back to the well once more, and we dig deep and say, okay, our whole lives we wanted to be caregivers, we wanted to be physicians. We've been working really in technology much of our life. And we said, looked around and we said, retail's important, mobile is rising, right? We're seeing healthcare reform. And people are still largely working in our minds in fairly incremental and small bore approaches. Maybe they're creating an app. Maybe they're creating a single line of service. But we said, if we really want to fundamentally change healthcare, we're going to have to think differently. And we created a mantra that we called twice half 10. Twice the health, half the price, 10 times the customer delight. And we realized that to really go at that, we were going to have to move past incrementalism and build a full stack. full stack has one notion in technology. It actually parallels the idea here. We have to bring together under one integrated roof the care, the coverage, and the cloud. So we conceived of building in Portland as a prototype marketplace, a complete campus, a healthcare campus, with the insurance built right in that you can control with your phone. And we gave ourselves an 18-month period to really bring that to market from scratch. And we've called it Zoom Plus Performance Health Insurance. I want to tell you a little about this for a second, because I think it is very much, part and parcel of what you're doing. You're trying to think big. You're trying to use technology. You're trying to solve really important and useful problems today using technology. So we have a concept of what I think Sarah's highest needs are. Again, very much like the airplane manufacturer and what they were trying to do. What we want to offer people at the very core is what we call radical access and control of your health care, of your health. Rad access and control. And what that means is for every aspect of your care, we want you to be able to control it with your phone or with your fingertip or with your eye or whatever ultimately, right? But we want to cede to you total control of your care. And I mean total, without any bounds, radical access, right? So you can walk and move seamlessly, experience care seamlessly throughout the cloud, whether it's in person, social, right? Control all of your data without any bounds. I want to cede 100% control to you, right, using technology. That's the first thing I want to do. And I want you to experience that. The second piece is, I'd like you to live in a blue zone. You may not want to, but I'd like you to try living in a blue zone. You know what a blue zone is? You guys know? You got it. Yeah, totally right. That's right. So we've seen anthropologists have studied the healthiest places in the world. People live the longest, have the richest, happiest, most, if you will, fulfilled lives. And there are some 5 or 6 kind of core kernel nuggets that these societies have in common, right? There's an emphasis on family and social. There's a common food platform of mostly plant-based diets with a heavy dose of legumes, beans. There's constant sort of moderate exercise in the lives of these societies. There's a moderation of tobacco and alcohol. And I think that we are looking to, at Zoom, in other words, make food and movement the core of medicine, right? Really, we know it to be true, right? At the end of the day, food and movement are the soul of health. So with Zoom Plus, what you'll begin to find is that every single touch will begin to incorporate life in a blue zone. Whether it's informational, social, every provider will begin touching you in a way that you'll begin to see, they're trying to help me live in a blue zone. The third level of needs-based that we're trying to bring with Zoom Plus Performance Health Insurance is this idea of being as healthy as you want to be. And to that end, helping you achieve your human potential. So when you join Zoom Plus, you'll be able to pick a path. One path is, I want to prevent and reverse disease, or even I want to begin to prevent and perform at my peak. This is a very a technology-powered idea. I want you to check out, if you would, on first Thursday of next month, the Zoom Plus Performance Lab. It's over in the Pearl District on Lovejoy and 11th, across from the Lovejoy Bakery. And it's a technology-infused laboratory, right, designed to help you get the latest assessment of all your body functions, of cell, brain, systems, right, that you can use to craft a performance strategy to optimize your brain. And I don't mean just as an athlete. I actually mean as a performer, as a thinker, as an inventor, as a creator, as a business person, all elements of performance. So this is what we're trying to create. And at the core of all of this is a team of people who are about 40, 50 engineers who are led by a fellow named David Cole, who joined us from Nike, where he ran their CDT group, their Consumer-Driven Technology group. And they're have made, I think in some ways, some unconventional choices. They've chosen to come to Zoom, and what they tell me is that the ability to not just develop technology, but to immediately put it in the hands of 250,000 people. You know, the minute they release their technology, it's touched by 250,000 people who are using it to improve their health and achieve their potential. It's being used by hundreds of doctors immediately, right, to deliver and take care of people. I think it's a very rewarding way when you have that close integration, right, of the care, the coverage, and the cloud all in one. So those are my 3 stories today. My stories are first the one of, you know, young physician trying to go off in the world and use technology to change healthcare and fight the dysfunction that we're seeing. Second, the story of Rolls-Royce and how they moved from being a product company to essentially a SaaS company, replacing product with software, right, to serve your highest needs. And lastly, our little story of Zoom Plus and our mission to fundamentally change American healthcare using technology. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. Yeah, good.
Am I live? Great. Thank you, Dave. We're going to take some questions from you. I want to start with a couple. Yours is a fascinating company, and I'm of the belief that part of the reason why it's so fascinating is you have a secret sauce that in some respects I'm not sure Americans want to really confront. And that is, you know, if you ask Americans, everyone will say American healthcare is too expensive, and part of it is that the healthcare system provides and gives us too many tests. But when it comes to us individually, we never want to be denied all those tests. And at a certain point, part of your secret sauce is you've developed a pretty sophisticated software program. I think you call it, what, Right Care?
Yes.
In which if I go to visit you, that software will tell you, will tell your physicians, or we'll get to that, the issue of nurses, you don't need to give them this test yet because data shows that you don't need to give someone an MRI just because they have a headache until you do X, Y, or Z. And in doing so, you reduce costs. And yet I can imagine that maybe you can't talk about that too much because we're not really ready to confront that. Or similarly, I'll let you answer this, you hire on a per capita or a percentage basis far fewer physicians than nurses, out of the belief that there are a lot of things that nurses can do as well or better than physicians. It's one of the ways you keep your costs down. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think just, you know, first, I think if you think about it just from even just from an entrepreneurial or even business perspective, if you think about something like, even just like Netflix, right? As Netflix moves from using a capital-intensive model of warehouses and CDs, right, to streaming care, to streaming their content, right, they can repurpose that capital into ways that actually deliver to you more value. That's the art of strategy, right? It's those trade-offs. We repurpose waste or capital. That's the same idea here. American medicine is defined by 4 waste streams today: excess utilization, excess unit pricing, sort of prices that are just decoupled from the cost of goods sold, tons of friction, and poor baseline health. So we think that by getting at those waste streams, so the one that you mentioned primarily here is overutilization. If you get a chance, you can see Atul Gawande did a great piece in New Yorker called Overkill, where he showed, it's been well proven, that half of American healthcare is either low value or no value per the science. And so how do you get at that, you know? So to get at that, it's what Mark was saying, is you have to use different people practicing different places, use different processes, technology, and getting paid differently. We call it the 4 Ps, right? And the heart of that is our technology engine, which Mark said is called Right Care. And the Right Care engine is both, it's a rules engine, it's an incentive engine, and it's a social engine, which undergirds our providers, their desktop and their mobile tool set. So they're heavily trained, they're top performers, but even within that system, we try to help them understand the latest evidence the latest science, and your particular situation to get you to the right care. And as Mark said, there are two social forces at play, right? I mean, one, historically in America, providers were paid fee for service. So they were trained and reinforced with economic incentives to do more. The more they did, the more they made. We've moved away from that model at Zoom to a team-based model. People are paid salaried, and they are rewarded for right care compliance and right care services. But the flip side is also the American culture is also, I think, bought into that. If you've been anywhere like in Europe, it pops out at you right away. You can walk through a town and see people walking around with a cane. Canes are in use, right? You don't see canes out in public very much in America. Well, why is that? Why is that? Because when you're 65, you're entitled to 2 titanium hips, right? It's just part of the American birthright. It's not in Europe. And so people take the cure, they go to the spa, they exercise, right? So there's a cultural, very powerful cultural force. So Mark's right. And that's why I talk about the blue zone. We are trying to, in some ways, begin to shift the culture to the idea of food and movement as medicine.
So was that a woo? So I've talked to Dave about this before, in which I've challenged him and suggested that there's a flaw in his business model, which is the competition. You're up against, for the most part, these enormous, the healthcare complex, which is unbelievably well capitalized. In many, if not most cases, is nonprofit, so they don't pay taxes. They have foundations. How can you possibly compete in that environment?
No, that's right. So this is interesting. You really can't compete, and in that way, it's quite liberating. So all of you, I assume in some way, are involved in some sort of, you're trying to disrupt, you're trying to change an industry. So in my mind, I look like an X and Y, like a Y and X axis, and the large health systems today are overall, as you said, enormously capitalized and overall fairly well run. They're not poorly run companies. They're run by professional managers largely, and their place on earth is to improve at 3% per year, right? And if they do that, everyone keeps their jobs, everyone sort of, earns a good living, and life goes on. So there's no place for us along that. We cannot compete along that improvement sort of axis, or that kind of like that steady axis, right? Incremental axis. So we are forced to play along the innovation axis. Our only way to play is by radically disrupting that model and moving from a 3% improvement, right, to a twice half 10. Can I just share with you a quick thing about this? This is, I think, is one of my favorite stories about this, is that when in 2010, New York Times did a great piece on Kaiser. And it talked about how Kaiser had invested $30 billion with a B on their IT in the previous decade. $30 billion on their IT. And then I said how most analysts thought, like McKinsey and Bain, those groups felt that they were probably 3-4% better than their disorganized competitors, than a non-organized health delivery system. We're like, wow, hold on, a decade of investment in IT, $30 billion, right? And you're a few percent better than the others who aren't doing those things? We're like, okay, you guys know that Google actually had in the business pre-startup, pre-IPO, less than $100 million, about $45 million of capital was put in prior to their IPO. Wow, right? How is Google infinitely better in a couple of years with a small amount of capital? And it becomes very clear. When you're in a big system like a Kaiser or a Legacy or Providence, and bless their hearts, you've got guys who are in a room, and they're asking these very small bore questions, like, okay, how do we decrease hospital readmission rates by a few percent? How do you tweak the model by a few percent? The guys in the Google table are asking these cosmic questions, right? How do you remap the Earth's surface? How do you organize all the books in the world? How do you, create self-driving cars? They're asking cosmic questions. So for us, we just have to ask cosmic questions. I mean, we can't ask the small bore ones, or we will fail, because you just can't compete with that. Today, when I hope you can check it out and see, but on the 24th, on Monday, we're releasing a new app. And the app really is right on the home page and right in your mobile. It's a store. We're trying to get to a radical health store where you can shop for all of your care, where every price is known to you, every wait time or access point's known to you. Everything is transparent. It's not all there, you'll see it, but you'll see the migration towards this radical control for you. That's our only way.
All right. We've got time for a couple of questions, if there are any, and we've got a couple folks with mics who are headed down.
Can you tell me how telemedicine is being enabled in the industry or maybe by your organization?
Yes, great question. I didn't see where it come from. Oh, hey, how are you? Yeah, so I'm just going to give you our strategy here right now. Our strategy is Cloud Care 380. What does that mean? Do you know? Cloud Care 380? Within 4 years, our care is 80% delivered in the cloud, 80% asynchronous, and 80% non-video, the balance being video. Make sense? And I really mean, of all time engaged in healthcare in our system, 80% in the cloud, 80% asynchronous, and of that, 80% non-video. So video is very important, but overall, so much care will be in the cloud that actually a small portion will even be in video. We're all in. We are trying to envelop our physical services with a cloud of care.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Zoom hired a lobbyist, went to Salem, and changed state law to allow an expanded use of telemedicine.
Yeah, and we've been in a 4-year battle with the industry to really allow telemedicine to be widely available. So that battle was won, and sort of you'll see important changes across everybody, across the whole space on 1/1/16, when cloud care gets reimbursed widely and other things, other barriers were broken down. It's a big deal. Yes?
I was a Zoom Plus or Zoom Care customer, and I really liked it because I could go in and say, well, do I need to see a doctor for my ankle? Is this something serious? And my insurance covered it. As I look to your future, I think that when I see all those people in Europe on canes, they're in pain. And the reason we get hip transplants is for pain relief, and is that an expectation that Zoom Plus is going to have its customers in a certain amount of pain? So I think I said the question.
No, I understand. Well, how about this? We care for people every day at Zoom, and the daily challenge for us is when folks have ear infections or sore throats, or we know typically that most of the time these are viral infections, right? But we also know that people, which means you leave with, gurgle with warm water kinds of instructions, right? But we also know from being in the business for our whole careers and for the last 10 years of Zoom, we know that people do want to have antibiotics. They feel like they at least have the cure in their hip pocket, they got value, right? And yet we know by the science that most of these are non-bacterial, don't need antibiotics, right? And there's risks, right? Antibiotics are medicine, and they work in your biochemistry, right? And they decrease social, the community tolerance for infection. So there's so many examples of that. So how do we work with folks like that, right? So we have to meet you where you are. That's the most important thing. We have to meet you where you are. So it can't be a, no, you will not have this. It has to be a, where are you in the spectrum of care, of wanting care, to more, I prefer to watch and wait, or no, I actually want to avoid care and I want to use natural medicine, food and movement. So we're being trained to work with you along the continuum. If you want that, if the science supports it, we're gonna be there for you. But we're gonna meet you where you are.
And the software knows that?
Not awesome question. The software doesn't yet know it, right? But that's our future.
We've got time for one more question.
What the software knows is what the science says, right? The software knows what the evidence indicates.
Good. One more question.
Thanks. I I just got my teeth done at Zoom Smile, or whatever you call it. So I'm going to go back to the workforce bit again, because I'm the daughter of a nurse practitioner, and she was doing this like 20 years ago
Yes.
in New York. So how do you construct the teams, and then how do you tell nurse practitioners who are fundamentally carers and questioning of how do you feel? How do you tell these people, okay, not only do you have the primary responsibility of being a nurse practitioner, asking the questions and whatnot, but you also have to interact with this enterprise software, with this proprietary enterprise software, because that's not really what nurse practitioners necessarily do. So.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, in the early years, we really struggled. A lot of folks did not want a part of the model and system that we were building. And what we found over time is that as Sarah began to have, as you hopefully began to have a great experience with Zoom, I think we began to see providers began to say, wow, I'm beginning to see patients here, customers here, Sarah's here, who are just having great experiences. And that begins to make, right, my life more rewarding, more fulfilling, right? So we began over time to get really buy-in. The other thing about it, though, from the patient responses, right? But the other thing that people began to find is that PAs, physician assistants, nurse practitioners, primary care physicians, they're all in this for one common reason. They have what we call a very powerful I vow, the intrinsic value of work, which is really all about, sorry, this fly is here with me. It's really all about fulfilling, right, their nurturing need, their healing needs, right? And if you create a system not based upon pedigree, where my title, my degree, you know, I'm from here or there, but based upon performance, right? And that system makes you feel competent and confident, right? That you have all the tools and support you need, then you begin to feel like, wow, that can happen to people, and I'm feeling just very competent in my role. I have the support I need. I'll tell you, this is not going to what I'm always scared to say this, but you know what? In 10 years, we have had no lawsuits. It's kind of bizarre, you know? But it's a level of competence and confidence that we've begun to gender in our people. And I think that's been the key. But you're right, though. You can't infringe upon that professionalism either, right? People are, right?
Dave Sanders, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thank you.